Hey everyone, welcome to Learn Art Studio. In this video, I'm going to show you exactly how I color a realistic face using alcohol markers and colored pencils. This is a full unedited session, no cuts, no time lapses, so you can follow along at your own pace and see every step of the process in real time. By the end, you'll have the techniques to create a professional looking skin tone and face. I've taken a base color, which is E00 in the Copic series. If you don't have Copic markers, you can just find the equivalents in your Ohuhu set, which is the marker set that most people have, because I know that the Copics can be a little bit expensive. So in this first coat, I just really go over the entire face once. I even colored the neck and the hair with the same base color. As I was saying, you don't have to use the Copic markers, the Ohuhus are quite fine. Next, I add a second layer of the same color, so E00 in this case, focusing on areas where I see shadow, under the jawline, behind the ear, under the nose, on the top lip, and under the bottom lip, or anywhere you can see the shadow in your reference image. Once it dries, the difference will soften, but it already gives me a sense of form and light and direction. This step is like setting the foundation before adding stronger contrasts. Now I switch to YR00, Barely Blush. This is one of my favorite parts of portrait drawing, adding the natural redness where skin is thinner, like the eyelids, the cheeks, the nose, the lips, and the ears. Immediately, the face feels more alive, as if blood is flowing under the surface. I like to exaggerate this effect a little, making the cheeks and nose rosier because it gives the portrait an emotional quality. What you have to understand when it comes to redness in skin or bluish areas, there's actually a reason for this. Underneath the skin, we have a big network of veins and arteries, and these colors tend to show through in areas of the face where the skin is actually thinner. So you're not going to see it so much on a cheek, let's say, because we have a little bit more fat there. But in an area that's very thin, like the corners of your nose or underneath your eyes, that's very thin skin. So that color is gonna show through that skin. So that's why oftentimes people are gonna look more tired. They're gonna look blue underneath their eyes. It's just because they have those veins and arteries that are passing through, and you can just see it through the skin that is just thinner. So some people have thinner skin than others, and that's why they always look like they have like that bluish tint. They're always tired. Looking at this image, you can see where the cheeks would be, let's say, rosier because there's more of the blood vessels, and where you would see maybe shadows like around those laugh lines underneath the eyes because you have those darker blue veins. I've switched to RV00 because I feel like the color I chose before just wasn't rosy enough. It didn't give the effect that I was looking for. Like I said, I really like to exaggerate the redness, not the redness, but the pink of the skin. It just really makes the portrait look more alive. Sometimes it almost looks like the character that I drew just had a moment. Maybe she was shy, maybe she just had to run to her appointment, or maybe she just had a good cry. So I find like this just adds so much character to the portrait. I think it is the one step that I like the most when I'm doing portraits and drawing. It's just the cute little thing, you know. You can make somebody look shy, you can make them look angry. Most of the expressions come from this rosiness. So don't skip this step and have fun with it, really. You can just give your character whatever emotion you want with that pink. Now I'm bringing in raw cashew to add slightly deeper shadows, still building step by step, not jumping straight to the darkest values. I'm also adding some of this raw cashew to the hair to give a base color for the hair, basically. I'm not going in thin lines like strand by strand. You just really want to follow the hairline and just make those blocks of color. Let some of the light shine through, so don't cover the area completely. I also left a ring above the crown of the head where the light would have hit, so oftentimes you'll see like that ray of light, but you can see it in my reference image. It is definitely there, so I wanted to leave it there because it just adds interest. So as you can see, I'm just going like with big, thick, squiggly lines, leaving some of the light to show through. So don't cover the entire area. You don't want it to look like one big block if you want it to look like one of those nice, fun portraits. To blend in what I've done so far, I go back with the base color and soften the edges. This blending step is one of my favorite things about alcohol markers, the way they allow colors to melt together so seamlessly. So again, I used my pink for the redness and then blended in a little bit with my base color. I work a little bit stronger on areas where I did those really, really strong shadows, like that area underneath the nose, just to make it a little bit less harsh so that there's not like a huge break. I just want it to be a little bit more blurry, less strong. I'm also bringing in a light blue. I place it under the jawline, in the neck creases, I actually color the entire eyeball blue, which you're probably thinking, wait, why is she doing that? That's going to look so weird. But trust the process. You'll see in the end, her eye will not look blue at all. I even color her teeth a little blue. I'll put some underneath the lower lip, in the shadow underneath the nose sometimes in the eyebrows. Someone asked me how to put the blue in a portrait without having the person look bruised. And that's a really good question. But just think back to that reference image that I showed you of the veins and the blood vessels and everything like that. I'm also adding some blue to the hair. As you know, or you might have seen my other portraits, I do like to do some colorful hair. I don't like to do just the brown or the blonde. I think it looks funner. And it's also a way of unifying all the colors. Since I'm putting some blue in the portrait as well, it just makes everything look more harmonious in the end. Just don't be afraid to play with colors. If you look at famous artists like Andy Warhol and things like that, and Picasso, um, They just didn't have to follow the rules. They did their own thing, and in the end, it looked pretty cool. So nobody said that you can't do colorful hair or a colorful face. Just have fun. Do do your experiments. In this portrait, I try to make it look like really realistic just to show you how to be able to make a realistic portrait. But in my next video, I'll do a portrait where we're really going to have fun with colors. So adding all sorts of wild, striking colors like, let's say, hot pink or lime green. And you'll see just how fun something like that can be. I saw another artist on YouTube who used really wild colors doing a portrait of Lizzo. And I was like, wow, that's just amazing. And no, it's not realistic skin tones, but in the end, it's a lot of fun. To keep the colors interesting, I bring in pale moss, which shifts the palette slightly into the greens. I use it under the neck. I also use it in the hair and in the iris. It's subtle, but it prevents the blue areas from feeling flat. I'm adding just a little bit more of this pale moss underneath the nose just to intensify that shadow a little bit. Sometimes when you're adding darker colors like this to the shadows, it can be a little bit stressful. And you're probably thinking, wait a minute, this is starting to look like something I don't really like. But you just have to trust the process because when it all blends in together, it'll look natural. I'm adding just a bit more to the brows as well. And I'm starting to deepen the shadow where the eyelashes will later be. I don't like to use colors like pure black because I find that that really dulls down um, the colors. So I'd rather work with colors like the moss or a dark blue. You'll see later I'm coming in with colored pencils in ultramarine and colors like that. And I never will use any black to do the final touches. So let's deepen just a little bit more of the shadow behind where the hair would be. Anywhere where light is not going to hit, I'm going to intensify with this pale moss. It's nice to add a little bit more contrast, not keep this so light and pastel. Back on the skin, I use Peachy Blush to deepen the cheeks even further and to blend everything together. I don't want this pale moss to look like such a contrast on the skin. So I'm going to go in and I'm going to deepen my shadows just a little bit, and I'm going to blend in my pale moss. I'm going back in with my pale moss just to add more of the shadows, because I feel that with my blend, I really took away too much of the shadowing on the side of the face that would not be hit by the sun. I go back with my base color and I blend it back all in together. So sometimes you just go back and forth with your shadow color, your base color, and you work in layers like that. It's hard to say how many layers. You'll just see on your drawing how many you need. I'm going back and doing that in the neck as well. Now I'm going in with a very pink color. I really want to intensify the rosy cheeks. In my reference image, she just really did have a nice rosy cheek. She had some rose eyeshadow. So I'm going back in with that. I always add a little bit more to the nose area too, because this is always a spot that people do have a little bit more of the blood vessels, and I think that it looks nice. It just makes the person look a little bit more active, maybe surprised or whatever. So I'm adding a little bit more to the cheek areas, a little bit more to the lips, a little bit more on the eyelid. Then for contrast, I take this sort of creamy yellow. I like using a light tone like this between darker and lighter values. They prevent muddy transitions and keep the skin glowing. So yeah, I basically use it between the light and dark values as transition. I'm going back in with my base color to do a little bit more blending again. I just don't want such heavy contrasts on the skin. Sometimes I'll do that for a stylized portrait, but since this tutorial is about realistic looking skin, I'm really going to blend as much as I can. So anywhere that I see that a shadow is just too deep or that contrast is a little bit too deep, I'm going in and I'm putting quite a lot of ink. I want this to be able to spread the colors and have them merge together. If you want something to show up as a strong contrast, you will hit your marker quickly and not put too much ink, and that'll make like a really strong cut. But if you add a lot of ink, that lets the alcohol spread inside the paper and then the colors will merge together. So you're going to get a much smoother blend. You just have to be careful what paper you're working with, because some thinner papers will accumulate the color and will make like rings. This is a very thick pad, so this is a mixed media pad. I could use watercolor on it, so that's why it's accepting this much ink. So I'm going back a little bit with my pink. I really go back and forth between my base color and my pink a lot. That's something that you'll just gauge on your own in your drawing and see when you've done enough. But I do want this pink to show through. It really makes a difference. It's the part that's going to make your character look alive and healthy. I'm adding some blue to the teeth and to the eyeballs. Don't worry. I know that for now you're thinking, I cannot do this. This is just too weird. But trust me, they're not going to look blue later on. You could have added a very pale gray as well, but I find that the blue will make the teeth look healthier versus the gray that kind of looks like somebody who's been smoking for a long time. So we're going back in with our pale moss and the irises just to deepen a little bit the color of the eyes and a little bit more in the eyebrows. I don't want them to melt into the image and to look like she has no eyebrows. I'm going to deepen a little bit more the shadows. Again, as you can see, it's just going back and forth with layers and layers and layers. The more layers that you do, the more depth that you're going to get in your drawing. Now I'm adding just a little bit in between the teeth. For the hair, I add a soft lilac color. It's called Thistle. I love creating those unicorn hair effects with multiple pastel colors. It's playful, but as long as the values are correct, it works beautifully. And whenever I introduce a new color, I like to repeat it elsewhere. So the lilac goes not only in the hair, but in this case also around the eye area, so the whole portrait feels more consistent. I decided I would add a little bit to deepen the shadow underneath. I'm going in with a very, very light gray just to add a touch of shadow on the left side and on the right side, just where the shadow would be the deepest from the lips onto the teeth. And I'm going in with a warmer gray, very, very light warm gray, just to soften that so that the shadows don't look too deep and that the teeth look natural. Now I'm going in with a white acrylic marker. This is a Posca on top of the gray, and I'm just adding a little bit of white. I don't want it to look like spots, so that's why you can see that I'm rubbing it with my finger just to soften it a little bit. So with this very dark gray, I'm going to go in and deepen the shadow, or the color of the iris, I should say. Now where I put this dark gray, I go back in with my pale moss, which is the color that I had originally put on the eye, just to make sure that that gray isn't, just looks a little bit more natural. I'm also going in with a lighter blue and doing the same thing. If you look at somebody's eye, you can see that there's like those transitions in the iris. Next, I use pale lemon yellow for highlights instead of pure white. I prefer this lemony yellow because it adds vibrancy. I place it basically anywhere the natural sun or light would hit. I'm using this light pink acrylic marker just to soften areas where I feel like the shadow was a little bit too deep. Like there was that little spot on the bottom of the chin that kind of bothered me. It wasn't blending in. So with this acrylic marker, I can go in and just dab layers of this pale pink to kind of soften the areas where I feel like I was just dissatisfied with my shadow, or I didn't want it to look so intense. If you're going to work with acrylic markers, just make sure that you put a tiny little bit of ink and you dab every single time. So this marker is actually getting very dry. It's almost empty. That's why you can see that I'm just like applying it in areas very fast, and I'm not necessarily dabbing. If your acrylic marker is new and it splats a lot of ink out, you're not going to be able to um, just go over areas like that like I'm going. You're going to have to really like just put a tiny bit and then dabble, but this is pretty much doing that effect for me because my marker is almost empty. At this stage, we're almost done, so we're going to finish up with colored pencils. I'm using a very light blue in the iris to really make that eye pop, and then a darker blue around the edges. I'm trying to go with what I saw in my reference image. The color isn't going to match exactly, but I find these colors work really well for her face. With this purple blue, I'm going to make little lines in her eyes just so that the iris doesn't look so flat. Actually, earlier I said that I was putting pale moss and dark gray in the iris, but I should have said the pupil. I'm sorry about that. So in this case, I really am working in the iris. So now let's go with a hot pink. And again, I'm working the lips, just adding those little creases, going back in to deepen the shadows. I like to work in circular sort of lines around the lips. I find that that really makes the lips look thick and round and pulpy, I guess. Is that a word? Gives the lips some pulp. I'm going to add a little bit more on top of her eyelid to increase that look of the eyeshadow that she was wearing. And maybe just a little bit in the corner of the nose where there's those blood vessels, increasing that a little bit. I'm using now a pale skin tone color. I'm going to be using this just throughout the face to blend everything so that the transitions are a little bit more smooth. Now back to some pink, just so that the color in the skin doesn't look so flat. As you can see, I'm always going back and forth, just between colored pencils, going layer by layer by layer by layer. The more layers that you put, the more everything is going to blend in smoothly. However, you don't want to go overboard either, where you have so many layers that you just can't color anymore because it's just not reacting to your pencil. It can happen if you have too many layers at some point. It's just not going to react anymore. Everything will be sort of caked on. So as you can see in this bottom place, there was that big highlight. It's still there, but I toned it down just a little bit so that that transition just sort of flowed more smoothly. So again, I'm going back with my pink, with my blush. Now I'm going to add just a little bit of like an icy blue on the top of the face, just to deepen those shadows just lightly. As you can see, I'm hardly even pressing on the paper. Now let's work our highlights just a little bit with the white. I hardly ever use white colors, but I wanted to just amplify that highlight a little bit because in my reference image, she really did have that big pop of white, probably from a spotlight. So I feel like it's important for this highlight to just really pop out. Let me show you my reference image again so that you can see what I'm referring to. Adding some white in the irises makes such a difference. There's always that little flash of light or that lighter color in the iris, and I feel like it makes such a difference. But later on, we're going to go and really intensify that with our Posca marker or whatever white acrylic marker you have, or those jelly roll pens work just as well. So anywhere where there was that big pop of white, I'm adding onto my portrait. So if you do this same portrait and follow along, then you'll do the highlights wherever I put them. But if you're working with your own reference image, just look at wherever there's those white pops of light and you add them always at the end, never at the beginning because you will lose them. I'm going back with my thistle color, that mauve, light purple sort of color, and I'm adding a little bit more to the lips in that area where the biggest shadow would be. The more of this that you do, adding the dark to the inner parts of the lip and leaving the the middle part of the lip lighter, the more that you do that, the more that your lips are just going to pop out and really create that 3D sort of, the word I used earlier, the pulpy sort of feeling. You're going to get that. It just really makes such a difference to do that with the lips. Adding a little bit of the white to the highlight on the top of the head, blending in this shadow again that has been irritating me since the beginning. I think I might have preferred not using the pale moss on that. I don't know. I still haven't decided. Maybe I should have used a little bit more of that, the raw cashew or something like that. I'm not sure. But in the end, this does end up looking quite nice. So I'm just going to add a little bit more of this icy blue to the bottom of the face because I feel like it's looking a little bit too orange for me right now. So I'm trying to just tone that down a little bit. When you want to tone down a certain color, an easy trick is that you look at your color wheel and you are going to take the opposite color on the color wheel to tone down the color that you're trying to tone down. So in this example, if I wanted to tone down blue, I would use yellow because it's on the opposite side of the wheel. And if I wanted to tone down orange, I would use blue. So that's basically the trick that you just have to remember forever. Just look at a color wheel, and whenever you want to tone down a color, you're just going to use the opposite color. So there you go. I hope you learned something new. This drawing is starting to look pretty complete. At this point, I'm just really finicking and adding little tiny details, just spots of color here and there. Um, I mean, at this point, I could say that it's pretty finished, but I do, I am a perfectionist, so sometimes I just add maybe a little bit too much or where it's not necessary, but hey, you'll know when to stop. So now is my favorite part. We're going to finalize the eyes with this ultramarine, and now you're going to see that everything just really comes to life. So I'm going over my eyelashes, and anywhere where in the image you can see that there is like just thick dark black. So really at the lash line it's going to be darker, and I'm going to go in and really deepen all of these details. And oh, this is just the most exciting part. I just love it. Adding a little bit more to the contour of the iris to really make that inner part of the iris pop. From far away, you'll see that it just makes it look like a more natural eye. And adding those little iris lines, I don't know what they're called. I'm just always so amazed to see like how adding the eyelashes and those final details just really makes those eyes pop and everything just come to life. Where it looked like an okay portrait, when you add these details, it just like it makes the whole difference. Look at the difference between the right eye and the left eye already. Like this is just, I just love this kind of part, where you're doing the end like that. And it's not something that you would be able to do with an alcohol marker because you would just get too much ink out. And I find that fine liners don't look as natural as colored pencils. Also, what's great about a colored pencil is that it forgives. So let's say I put a little bit too much, I can actually go in with my eraser and remove it. So let's deepen the shadow in the nostril as well. See the difference. I mean, you can see just how like the nose looks so much more real now. Just adding a little bit of that ultramarine to the nostril and a little bit to the shadow of the nose. I love colored pencils. I don't know if you can see my excitement. I'm getting a little bit too excited about this. So adding a little bit more details to the earring. At this point in the drawing, everything is about details. So the colored pencils, that's their job. And then after that, you're completely done. So now we're going to do the second eye, same principle. I'll let you listen to the music. Maybe you're tired of hearing me talk. As I mentioned earlier, I don't like using pure white, so I'm going over with this very light yellow over the areas where I put the white, just to make that highlight look a little bit more natural. And it's also blending all of my colors together smoothly as well. I'll take these last few moments of the video to thank you for watching today, and I hope that this tutorial really helped you with your realistic skin tones. I have videos on my channel about just all sorts of stuff. So I have coloring book videos, I have ink experiment videos. I just have a really big variety. I love everything that has to do with art. I even have videos on how to do encaustic painting, which is the art of painting with wax, which is super, super interesting. If you haven't seen it, you might want to look into it. It's great. It's a lot of fun. So I do hope that you have subscribed to my channel. And if you appreciate this video, please don't forget to like and share it. Anything that you do will help YouTube make my channel grow, and it really makes all of this worthwhile for me. But no matter what, I just really appreciate you taking this time with me today. And if you have tried this tutorial and you still have questions, please write it in the comments. I answer all comments. I read all your comments, and I just really love interacting with anyone watching the video. So don't be shy to do it. So again, thank you. And I really do hope that you've enjoyed this video today and that it has helped clear up the mysteries of making realistic skin tones. Our final step is adding the freckles. I find that adding freckles makes the face look a little bit more natural. I mean, I could have put more, but since I was trying to do a realistic portrait of Taylor Swift, I decided to put them exactly in the place where they go, but I usually put more. So here we go, all done. And on the right, you have the color swatches in case you want to get the same marker.